Welcome to Keeping Score. I'm Rick Horrow. Each week we bring you insights from the playmakers, deal makers, and rule makers in the world of sports. I'll give you my take on some of the items of the week using my 30 years of experience doing deals for teams, leagues, and players in the $750 billion business of sports. Plus, we'll talk with a central figure in the sports world. The views expressed in this podcast are my own and do not represent the views of Reuters. Let's get started. It is that time of year again. It is the time where, I'm not sure anybody knew this, but we have 1.35 billion chicken wings being eaten during the Super Bowl. 1 in 5 people, according to Wallet Hub, would skip the wedding of a close friend or relative to watch their team in the Super Bowl live. More than 1 in 7 would skip the birth of their child, they say in a survey smugly. My question is, who's the one that's not? To answer that and many other questions, our global editor at Reuters, Dan Colarusso. How's that?
I would skip my own funeral to watch the Giants and the Patriots in the Super Bowl again.
Although I think there are a lot of people who would rally around the crypt and start giving you a standing O. But that's another story for another day. Listen, bottom line of all of this is Super Bowl is an incredible event around the world. It's even more incredible for the host city now that they've confirmed how to do a 2-week party. And it's even more incredible in a place like Minnesota, where notwithstanding the fact that it's going to be 1 degree, everybody understands it is a payback for their stadium development, but it's also once every 20 year during a bonding period opportunity to showcase the world. What do you think?
Well, I think, live sports, specifically big events, have become what we call tentpole events in the media business. The fact that cities have that same shot of the tentpole, but infrequently, once every 20 years, once every 10 years, whatever it might be, it really does make it that much more important for a location to get it right. And I think the interview you have coming up kind of speaks to that, and speaks to kind of being a tentpole for a few different things that helps the city be viable for the big events and trains the world to come to them.
Kevin Warren, president of the Minnesota Vikings, has been involved in the development and building of the U.S. Bank Stadium. He took us on an exclusive tour of it. He has aspirations of bringing the Vikings to the Super Bowl, 1 game away this year. And frankly, somebody who has philanthropy, has business, has legal. He's a well-trained lawyer, and he's somebody who you can really understand the history of. We caught up with Kevin Warren, and here is his perspective now. There were times, and we all understand the dynamics of facility development these days, and it's more than just increasing property taxes, spending $20 million, making it a public works project, having baseball and football in it, making it round and say, go play. It is much different, and this is for lack of a better term, after it was described here, to me, it's a generational icon.
Oh, absolutely. First of all, I think it's a phenomenal public-private partnership. It really shows that private business, private big business, the government can come together to do special things for the community, for kids, and for the various constituents involved. And you're right. This is a complicated project because it needed to be designed in a manner that it would stand the test of time, not only from an operational standpoint, but also just from an integrity and community standpoint.
We all understand from a general perspective politics is fleeting, and we all understand that everybody has an opinion on stadium development, arena development, from the color of the seats to where the location should be to who takes care of the overruns and anything in between. The Vikings hadn't performed very well in the field for a while, and there were also some behavioral issues, which in Minnesota don't work very well.
Right.
So you had a lot to overcome,
basically,
and you did.
Yeah. I think what it is, it really is, all the credit has to go to ownership. They've been supportive from the day that they bought the team and closed on the deal back in 2005. They provided all of us the resources financially and support. It's one thing for some owners to provide financial resources, but to provide financial resource and the support and the encouragement and to accept our ideas on this. And that's what really became the kind of the economic energy behind this project. And so you're right. I think things are falling into place. This is a great project. It's good for us to come together. The community will use it, and we hope we win a lot of football games here and one day can bring a Lombardi trophy back here to this building.
Isn't it amazing how the enhancement of a brand makes people feel differently and better about the team on the field, and then on the field, all of a sudden, things happen differently that you didn't even expect. It happens in a lot of different sports, and we've all seen that. The important thing I think people ought to also remember is that this is not just a football stadium. You've already had AC Milan as we tape this. You're having Luke Bryan. You're going from Luke Bryan to Metallica, which certainly pushes the ends of music. But it's designed for baseball. You have a Final Four that's committed for 2019. You'll be in the Super Bowl February 4th, 2017, or you'll be around it, and you'll have the X Games. This is truly an entertainment facility, not just a sports venue.
Absolutely. I mean, you think that there will be some activity that will go on here on a daily basis, and all the way from weddings to bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs and major concerts, major soccer games, high school football, baseball, our games, the X Games, like you said, we have the Final Four for 2019, the Super Bowl in 2018. There are just a lot of excellent events, and I think what it shows is that this building was created in a way that it will cater to various groups, and people will be able to enjoy it at different levels, and so that's what we're excited about.
How important was the downtown urban development regeneration aspect from Target on one side to you guys on the other side?
I think very important. I mean, you think about it, there's been $1 billion that's been invested in this area, and it's changed the complexity of it. I mean, there was a great picture in the Star Tribune a couple months ago where it showed a picture of downtown of where it was before this project began. But if you look what's happened now with the park and the commons area, the condominium, the apartment development, just the energy in this area of town is outstanding. So I think being in an urban setting was critical to the success of this project. And Rick, what's interesting about this is really it was 31 months ago that we played our last football game here. That's just, that's astonishing to think we actually played a football game that short a period of time in the same location. Because if you look at the most recent stadiums, whether it's Indianapolis or Dallas or the New York Giants or San Francisco, they're built in a different location, which is much easier. So as I tell people all the time, I mean, we really had 2 stadium projects going on. One getting ready to go play at the University of Minnesota, but to be able to tear the Metrodome down and then rebuild it here and have it ready to operate within 30 months is nothing short of a miracle.
We'll get back to that miracle in a minute, but it's actually 2.5 because you got a training facility that's just opened up as well. Tell us about TCO.
Yeah, so we're excited. I mean, we knew, just like you said, anytime you want to rebuild and reshape a brand, one of the areas that you can start in is one, building an outstanding stadium, but then also building a place that you practice and spend most of your days. You think about it here, the Vikings, I mean, we'll play at least 10 games here and hopefully a couple more playoff games a year here. We have an excellent young football team under the leadership of Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman. But in order to round that out, to really get us ready for the next 30, 40, 50 years, is that we needed to develop a practice facility. So we purchased 200 acres in Eagan, Minnesota, which is probably 12 miles from downtown. It's the former Delta Airlines, Northwest Airlines site. And so the topography of that land is beautiful. It's rich. It has lakes. So we broke ground on that last Tuesday. And then we also announced a 20-year naming rights partnership with Twin Cities Orthopedics, which will allow us to develop the best environment, best in class, a world-class environment for our players, staff, and coaches, because for the last 2 years we've had our employees in 3 different locations, out at Winter Park where we currently are, another building across the street, and then we had our other sales and marketing and ticket office people here across the street from the stadium. So to be able to get them under one roof will be outstanding.
And by the way, the beautiful facility with lakes and rolling hills, and he's very poetic in describing it, that's where Mike Zimmer is going to lock down these athletes and make them better. So they ain't going to see it. They're not. You're not. They may see some of it. But they're not going to see a lot.
But one thing, but the interesting thing about that, the 40 acres is where our practice facility will be. But we have another 160 acres that we're going to develop, where we'll have mixed-use housing, restaurants, hotels, a conference center, retreat centers, and we really want to bring in the community. We're going to have Friday night football games, high school football games. We're going to call it Skull Night, and also give young broadcast individuals an opportunity to film and be interactive in those games.
My sense also, without reading about it, is if Twin Cities Orthopedic is involved, there will be some notion of sports medicine advancement.
Absolutely.
And some and you got acreage to be able to experiment
Yes,
on that too.
right. So it's good. So
Yeah.
we're excited.
Yeah.
They were a perfect partner, and we're just excited to really develop it, and hopefully it'll be the kind of prototype for going forward in the National Football League.
Speaking of partnerships, everybody talks about public-private partnerships, and not too many people really understand what it means other than a vehicle to get more public money. Your case, not the case. You do have a pretty interesting mix. You've got 350 or so from the state and 150 or so from the city. You take a substantial risk, you meaning the team and private. But the perspective of corporations between U.S. Bank and their published $220 million deal and TCO and some of your other partners, you're blessed with having a very vibrant and rich corporate community in Minnesota, but you've also taken advantage of that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have, I think it's 19 Fortune 500 companies here in the Twin Cities area. A lot of also just excellent non-public companies like a Cargill. But you're right. But as you know better than anyone, you know, these companies don't put their name on brands that aren't structured and handle their business accordingly. So it took a lot of time and energy these last couple of years to make sure that we actually had something to bring to the table, to build our brand, to build the stadium, to build our practice facility, and also to build a good football team, and then just develop an environment around the Minnesota Vikings that really, when people hear that name, it becomes synonymous with class and grace and style, and really building a best-in-class environment. So we've been fortunate to be able to do that.
That's a very important point from a business perspective for our audience. You can identify a corporate headquarter and say that's in this city, and then you assume it's going to be one meeting and you sign on the dotted line because the corporate CEO plays golf with the owner of the team, and that's it. This is rigorous. It is financial, it is legal, it is very complicated, and U.S. Bank might have been an obvious first meeting, but that in no way meant it was going to get the deal done, just like Lucas Oil in Indy or AT&T in Arlington and Dallas. These are very complicated transactions.
Every one of these relationships, first of all, starts with a relationship. You have to have a personal relationship, but you know, they stand on their own. And so you need to develop a personal relationship, a business relationship, and it can't just be an environment where we go to a meeting and say, hey, this is how you all are going to benefit us. We need to make sure we spend the time to say that the door swings both ways, that this is how you think we can benefit the Minnesota Vikings, but vice versa. This is how we think we can be a benefit to their brand. And that's why it's really important that we keep our brand clean, build a great football team, build a great business, and also be great community partners and really help all of these wonderful companies. I'm just so excited to say we have all this business here in the Twin Cities, and most of the business that we do here is in the Twin Cities. And I think what it's doing is exposing people outside of the Twin Cities of how valuable this market is and how rich this market is.
Let's go way outside. Forbes came up with, and it's interesting because these numbers are always in some ways made up, but there's a good range. And Forbes, you're 18th in the NFL as far as value today. It'll no doubt rise after the stadium opens. But of all of the 50 international sports franchises, the Vikings are 39th on the list of their value, $1.6 billion. But it is interesting to know how international the Vikings brand has become and will become.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing we talk about. I mean, it's interesting. We have one in particular, but we have a couple fans that fly in from the UK for our home games. And so I just think the nature of our brand and the uniqueness of the colors and also the design of the uniforms and because of the international roots it has, there are some people who have followed it. But and we were fortunate a couple years ago to play in the UK against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I was really
how'd that game turn out?
It was outstanding. One, we won the football game. People stayed healthy, but I was really it just reiterated. I knew it was this way, but to be able to see the magnitude of Minnesota Vikings fans around the world was really refreshing. So,
are you a pioneer for, Roger Goodell challenged his staff to deliver $25 billion annually by the end of this labor agreement, which is an interesting challenge. But so international revenue on the horizon. Are we close to looking at Real Madrid just got that $1.6 billion kit deal for 10 years?
Right.
Are we looking at international jerseys? Are we looking what kind of international revenue streams do we see?
I mean, I just think the opportunity for growth is amazing from an international standpoint. Whether it's actually from a tangible, uniform related standpoint, or if it's more so from a media right standpoint. But I think what's happening and we constantly challenge our staff on a daily basis that we really have to look, yes, we have to take care of our Minnesota market, and then we have to take care of the surrounding states, and then we look at our fans on a national basis, but also, this is a global game. And what are the creative ways that we can pull in fans that who may not have a chance to come here? I heard a stat recently that only 4% of the fans around the world that call themselves Vikings fans will ever come to this building. Because you think about it, if we're sold out, your season ticket holders, typically we have recurring business. But one of the things that we're focusing on here at the Vikings is the fan who lives in the UK, or who lives in Paris, or who lives in Sweden or Denmark,
I was going
or
to say
whatever the case may
Scandinavian
be.
affinity would be an interesting
Absolutely.
thing to look at.
That they get the same feel that when they see our Vikings brand, that when they follow us on Vikings.com, that they get a same feel as the person who actually lives here in the Twin Cities that comes to every home game.
It is interesting that it used to be a lot of the teams wanted to be last in for all of these games across the pond, and now Jaguars, Rams, others want to be first in.
Right. I just think, and again, you look where we're going to play in Mexico City this year. I mean, there's an entire potential opportunity, just the way the world is going. In China, I mean, there's just some unique opportunities. So it's exciting, as I said, to have owners like we do have who are on the forefront of looking to grow the game, and it's not only from a business standpoint. It's just from a goodness standpoint. This is an excellent game. It's football is a team building game. It's a character building game. I have a son who's going to be a senior in high school this year who's a football player, and I'm just excited that he played as a kid and in high school, and it looks like he's going to have a chance to play at the college level. So, and I just look the way it's helped him to mature and the work ethic that associated with it. So I think it's the greatest game on the planet right now. We need to spread it.
Did you hear that, agents? His kid's going to be playing at the college level. Be very careful.
Right.
Be careful about that. So, just a couple more on competitiveness. You were, I know people don't want to think about it, but you were a chip shot field goal away from the next round of the playoffs last year, and you're entering the first game of the world-class stadium on September 11th. How do you manage expectations?
I mean, I just think part of the growth process. There may be some people who don't want to talk about how close we were last year, but I think it's good to refresh and reflect upon that we were close. But as just like every business relationship, every season stands on itself. There's no guarantee that we'll win X number of games this year. I know one thing: Coach Zimmer is an excellent coach. He's tough. He's demanding. He keeps the player's mind in a positive space. Rick Spielman has brought in great talent. I'm excited about this season to see the young folks have an opportunity to grow, and I think we'll do extremely well. So there are other factors from injuries and all those things that go into play, but it's really exciting not only to see the organization excited, but to see this community. This community here is really excited about the Minnesota Vikings and about this new stadium.
And to see a guy who grew up as a lawyer. He was a partner in a law firm. So inherently there is a limit on his enthusiasm. Not today. He's very excited.
Right.
Well, Kevin Warren has a lot to say, certainly in the business of economic development, masked as facility development director, masked as Minnesota Vikings president. So what's your overall thought of the interview, and what do you think of the Super Bowl generally?
Well, it's really interesting. I think we are getting cold weather city Super Bowls now, right? We had one in New York a couple of years back, Minnesota this time around, and you wonder how that skews the equation for all the related events. And again, it's a balmy 1 degree in Minnesota. Did you say?
It'll be, I think, a high of 1 degree. The good thing is that it's like Groundhog Day. Everybody kind of burrows around indoors, including getting to the stadium. But that's
right.
We're not playing golf. There's no golf there this week.
But I think it's interesting in that you set this up for the Super Bowl, and that's fantastic. But I think Kevin talked about the downtown redevelopment overall, and that's a year-round thing, and that'll even happen in the spring, come the spring thaw. The $1 billion invested in the area around the arena. You have the Final Four there in March. You'll have you have baseball there, obviously. He even mentioned bar mitzvahs. I don't know if he was kidding or not, but for a venue, it shows the flexibility. I think Minnesota's an exemplar of it. It shows the flexibility you need from a venue right now. It can't be a single-use thing. And the other uses can't just be built in as afterthoughts. You saw how horribly the Brooklyn experiment ended with the NHL, or is ending with the NHL. Great concert venue, great basketball venue, but a second professional team, which would have been a boon. They had it for a while. It looks like they're losing it. you need to put a lot of thought into those other things because you need to be a 12-month venue to be financially viable both to the area and to the entities who are invested in it.
Yeah, and from a balance sheet perspective, Kevin does make that point. But from a mega event perspective, as we talked about, they're getting the Final Four. They're getting major concerts. They're getting the religious revivals, as we talked about. The NBA All-Star Game is in the not-too-distant future. And let's remember, the economic impact that's unquestioned by all of these, I would say cynical, we would say academic economists, is that the economics of bringing people from other areas to these mega events during seasons when you might not otherwise have people in these hotels is unquestioned. And what this does is you guarantee regular rotations for regular events, even in cold weather cities for years to come. And if you're a stadium development guy, as I have been, if you're looking at a 20-year bond cycle, you recoup your investment out of these major events the first maybe 5-10 years out of it. And that's one of the things that I think takes your comments about the bar mitzvahs to an entirely different level.
Well, it's funny because you look at it and you could joke around about bar mitzvahs. He also talked about it being a museum in some sense, a theater in another sense. But when you bring a Final Four or a Super Bowl or high impact events, you get CEOs there. And CEOs look for places. Thomson, full disclosure, Thomson Reuters has a huge presence in Eagan, Minnesota. Big part of our corporate parent is there. You expose CEOs to cities and amenities and a sensibility that they may like. You see the development going on in Nashville these days. You mentioned Indianapolis a lot. You start to attract some corporate grist. And when you do that, that has returns obviously beyond anything else. Now, how much the public is willing to pay for a stadium and how much they know about what they're paying for the stadium is another issue. But you can't knock both the short-term economic impact and the potential to change the sensibility of a place, much like Oklahoma City or like you talked about a couple of weeks ago, Bob Greasy, South Florida. How does that all change around either an event or a winning team or just increased and heightened presence?
Yeah, it's a good point. The other piece of this is I'm looking as we speak at a ticket that I got, and it has on it face value $3,000, by the way, and that's even before the markup of the markup of the markup of the markup. Now, cynics would say that's terrible because that's corporate America, corporate greed, and those of us who understand how business is done would counter by saying these are people who are used to venues to do business around. You're not going to have a whole lot of golf or swimming in Minneapolis this time, maybe some ice fishing.
Not unless
you got
you're
a whole
really
lot of corporate
tough.
people
Yeah,
who, at least for 2 days, are flying in over a weekend without a whole lot of other stuff to do other than have meetings, do business, know a little bit more about Minnesota, and economically, it's a good thing to do.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And honestly, we were talking about it. It is the NFL's shot this year specifically. There's a lot of pressure on the Super Bowl. It's the NFL's shot to prove to the world that this decline we're seeing, both in gravitas and in ratings, is not a long-term affliction, is not a permanent affliction, right? I mean, this is a great Super Bowl. Although we've had good Super Bowls in the last couple of years, a great Super Bowl this time would go a long way to making Roger Goodell and his compatriots feel a little better, no?
Yes, and one quick comment about all of that, too. The NBC streaming and simulcasting 11 hours of unauthenticated, they call it, content in and around the big game. Started 12 o'clock, a pregame stream, halftime show streamed, postgame show streamed on Yahoo, streamed on NBC. And, I don't care about streaming as much as the post-mortem measurement. You talked about the decline of ratings. Now, are we prepared as an industry to measure total number of eyeballs? Still not yet. Now they go into the Olympics, NBC does. And after February, we put the question again, how many people are watching? And the $20 million person primetime Olympic figure that they're trying to get, that's streaming plus television, Super Bowl as well? I don't know. It's another issue for another day, but it's certainly something the industry's got to tackle.
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. And the NFL's problem is unique because they have a great long-term brand. They have the great revenue tributary in fantasy, but they're a little bit adrift in the traditional linear measurements, right, around ratings. And they have to figure out how to either solve that or change the conversation to a new metric. And getting to that metric is where they need the help. And you and I talked about it before we came on the air. You need a quality matchup, quality teams, and you need something to elevate the sensibility of the game to get that that Tiger Woods effect, to keep the casual people involved as opposed to them taking a step back because of either CTE, the national anthem, the violence, whatever it might be that has kind of moved society away from mainstream football fandom these days. That's what you need. You need the casual ones back in the mix, and that's going to be the tough part.
Quality matchup, quality teams put you on the spot. You usually engage in kind of vague conundrums in your newsroom. Who wins and what's the score?
I'm an NFC East guy, but because I'm an NFC East guy and a New York one, I can't root for the Eagles. It's hard to root for the Patriots, but because the Giants typically whoop up on them in the Super Bowl, I'll say the Patriots in a close game.
Okay, well, that's good enough. I mean, that helps me with score. So Eagles 21, Patriots 17. Rick Horrow, Dan Colarusso, speak with you soon. Thanks for listening to this edition of Keeping Score. The producer, Alex Cohn. Associate producers, Freddie Joyner and Ryan Warner. Assistance provided by Carla Swadek, Tanner Simpkins, and Ronnie Sokach. And the executive editor of Reuters Digital, Dan Colarusso. I'm Rick Horrow. Thanks again for listening. See you next time on Keeping Score.